1450 WOL Radio.
And I just saying to this, folks, our guest is Griot Baba Lumumba from Umoja House in the district. And this is what Baba Lumumba is discussing, the battle between black culture and popular culture in our community. He claims that without us realizing it, our lack of developed African-based cultural frame of reference in our community has allowed the negative influences of popular culture to guide our young people into a direction that works against our development. What are your thoughts? 800-450-7876 on line 2. M's waiting for us from D.C. M, your thoughts. You're on with Baba Lumumba.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate being allowed to say something in this conversation. Listening to this while I'm at work, I listen to your show a lot, Carl. I just wanted to make sure that I made some points, and then I have a question for you, Baba. And one of the points I want to make is, yes, there's the African American Museum, but I just want to make sure that the public hears me say, if you're outside of Washington, D.C., it is worth it to come to D.C. and see the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. It is a beautiful museum, and they have discussions there all the time. So my understanding is that the African American Museum is titled in a way that explains what's in there, and that it's also a work in progress. And if you wanted to see something which goes very far back, then you might want to check out the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. Beautiful place, as I was saying. So then the other thing I wanted to bring up is, I'm hearing your discussion, and what I'm not hearing is your belief in the fact that cultures change over time, Baba. Because, I hear a lot of sort of talk about like the problems of culture and what's kind of happening, but cultures change. And I would think that if we're talking about African cultures, and we're going back to what we're told in the Bible, whether a lot of that is true or not, but there was a system of maybe it wasn't called capitalism at the time, but my limited understanding is that you had pharaohs and all this, and they were thinking of themselves as being anointed by God, and there were a whole lot of people who they were subjugating to who were in poverty and building amazing things with slave labor. So and living very well while another set of people were subjugated. So that's a reality. At least that was my understanding of that. And then the last thing I'd like you to comment on, because I don't want to take up too much time, is your understanding of finance and economics. I am an attorney and an investor, and from what I have seen happening lately is that they have these, and I'm not sure if you know about this, but they have these really big loans that are now given out. I didn't watch the thing about Bezos, but I know about Bezos because I watched the stock market every day for the last maybe 25 years. And I can tell you that I know that Amazon hasn't really made a profit in a very long time, but there were many investors who invested in Bezos. Now, but beyond Bezos, because I don't really, I'm not really worried about him. I'm more so just making sure that the public, and I'm wondering if you know about these mega finance loans that are happening. And they're happening because the value of loaning money has gotten very inexpensive. So what I have noticed, and what I think that a lot of us as a people need to start understanding, is economics, because what's happened to it, especially like a place like Ohio State University, they were given, I'm not sure if you know this, they were given maybe 300, it was like a ridiculous amount of money to do all this investment, a loan which they wouldn't likely be able to pay back, but they were going to be able to loan more money out themselves into things that they were going to do to pay them off into the foreseeable future. And it's because money is so cheap that they could do this, and they will actually be able to make money on money and pay back and still have debt. So please answer if some of these things you're saying about capitalism are founded in you having an understanding of macro finance and economics. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Sam.
Okay, I once taught elementary economics at a college, but it's been a while. Am I familiar with everything that's going on in macro and microeconomics? No, the answer is no. But what we know is at this point is that the concentration of wealth in this world is becoming smaller and smaller. We know that. We know that the gap between the rich and the poor is becoming larger and larger. We know that. We know that the problems of that gap are compounding, that the system itself encourages that compounding, that it encourages smaller and smaller groups of people to make more and more money. And that has a price to pay. And when you saw the thing on Jeff Bezos, one interesting thing about it is that he claims to be for his customers. Henry Ford used to say, we're going to make a car that our employees can buy. Well, in an economy in which, your efficiency depends on robots, you don't care about your robots buying a car. You don't care about, you're talking about macroeconomics at the point in which large numbers of people in the world are suffering because of the concentration of wealth. No matter how legitimate that seems at any point in time, the consequences are disastrous. And, when you talk about climate change, when you talk about, it figures into that. Let's take the problem with plastic. You got a serious problem in the world of plastic, but you don't have a system that allows you to curtail that, to stop the catastrophe that's upon you. You got a system in the world which carbon dioxide is melting the polar ice caps to a disaster that is going to harm the entire world. These are products of capitalism. No matter how you want to look at it, you have a system that is not capable of making any changes that can rescue itself. That's the system that you're in. You got to face that. You can't act like that ain't real, that ain't true, because it is true. So, are there any...
Let me jump in here for a second. As Em stated, should we embrace some of that? Shouldn't we have some of our people grabbing some of those funds that are available now that he says money's, these loans are easy to get, and we know after a while the market's going to tighten up.
You're asking, should you participate in a system that is destroying itself? Should you participate in a system that clearly has no capacity to alter its capacity for self-destruction? That's really what you're asking.
Even if it helps our people?
It's not going to help our people if we have no world to live in. How are we going to be helped by that self-destruction? We ultimately can't be helped. We need another system, another way of looking at life. That is going to preclude that kind of development. That's going to preclude that. And we can look to our ancestors. And then you talked about earlier this question of cultures change. Well, change is never for the good. The question isn't whether things change. The question is whether they change for the better or the worse. Change can be equally for the better or the worse. The question in the essence is the change helping us or is the change hurting us? Yes, cultures change. But, understanding the essence of that culture, understanding that in the white man's frame of reference, in his culture, controlling of nature is possible, desirable, and necessary. In our cultural frame of reference, it is neither desirable or necessary. That our frame of reference is sustainable. It is not sustainable. No matter how many people get wealthy, it's not sustainable. If you don't understand that, if you can't see that, it's not going to work. You can't join this system that is self-destructing. This system is self-destructing.
We say we buy that, and we're the 2-minute warning. And can we, for 2 minutes, can our people have some fun? Can our people enjoy the spoils that they made on our backs?
Carl, you're asking before you fall off the cliff. Can you enjoy the glides in the ground before you hit the ground?
Right. Enjoy it because you're going to go to the ground anyway, so might as well enjoy it.
Well, if you're on the cliff, you can figure out how not to fall off the cliff. That's the trick. Now, Donald Trump ignores the consequences of the approach to life that is so endemic in this society. That's one of his major characteristics. He says, let's forget about global warming. No matter what the consequences are, let's forget about it. It's a hoax. No, it's not a hoax. No, you have to save yourself. No, you have to look to an alternative. No, you can't equate change with improvement, which is another very serious problem that society does. All change is quoted as being improvement. No, it isn't. Much of the changes that we have seen in the world has resulted in us being on this cliff. We have to back off of the cliff. We have to choose another direction. We can't jump off the cliff and enjoy the flight to the ground and claim
it's going to crash. We're going to crash too, because whenever the economy goes south, if it catches a cold, we get pneumonia. We get the worst end of it.
Which is what's happening to us. Which is what's happening to us right now.
So shouldn't we get a chance to equalize before the final whistle?
But we're not. We were brought here as slaves. Our status, one of the things that Barack Obama should have taught people is our status has not changed. They're not going to allow us equality within this system. We're going to get the worst end of the stick no matter what. So it's not possible for a black, Oprah Winfrey probably, there may be a few black people with enough money who could capitalize on a super loan and do a little bit of good for a small amount of black people. But I mean, is that what we want? Is that what we're looking for? Is that freedom? Is that what we want? Is the direction that we want to move in? Is allowing a few black people to live well? Is that what we call our direction? Or where we want to go with this?
Hold that thought right there. We got to take a short break, and maybe it's the wrong black people who have the money. Maybe that's where we need to address. But I'll let you talk about that on the other side, folks. You want to join this conversation with Baba Lumumba? Reach out to us.